What's good, homies? Welcome back to Grim. It is time for more insanely terrifying stories from Reddit. I've got a few of these to go over with you today that are sure to shock you, and I'm just going to give a fair warning. Do not watch this if you're alone at night, because you're going to have these stories running through your head as you're trying to fall asleep, and you're going to be terrified. Today's stories are all stemming from the subreddit LetsNotMeet, where people share stories of real-life encounters they've had with people that they'd rather not see again. This first story is pretty lengthy, but the user themselves, I honestly think, were in actual danger of being kidnapped. And let's just say, if this didn't actually happen, they are an incredible writer, because this is going to be one of the most tense stories you've ever heard. It's titled, "Date invited me to a fake barbecue and then wouldn't let me leave. House had a soundproof music studio in the basement," and the user states, "I'm so sorry this is so long. Maybe I included too much detail. I don't know. I don't post very often. I'll put a TLDR at the end. This took place a while ago, 2015-ish, but I'll probably never forget it. Around 21 at the time and female. I was still fairly new in my city. I had just gotten out of a bad relationship and wasn't in the best place mentally and didn't know a lot of people in my town besides my ex and his friends. I was on a dating/hookup app looking for people to hang out casually with, maybe find a friends with benefits or something. I had matched with a 25-year-old guy, Simon. We talked sporadically in the app for a few days. He explained he was in a band and living in a house with his bandmates. He sent me their music. It was just audio on YouTube with a heavily edited still image of 4 or 5 guys playing rock instruments, and one of them looked like him. The music was an interesting combination of styles and not really for me, but whatever. He seemed like a nice enough guy. He stopped replying for a few days and I figured that was that. Moved on. Then, one day I was at work and got a message from him saying sorry he'd been so busy and inviting me to a barbecue with his friends and bandmates in their yard. He explained that their band manager was providing them a house to live in. Based on the lack of views on the YouTube video and the fact I only saw one photo of him playing in the band, I figured he was probably exaggerating the band manager thing. I thought it was more likely something along the lines of a bar manager friend giving them a discount on rent in exchange for being a house band at their bar or something. I didn't really think much of it beyond that. Normally, I would have just said no to going to a barbecue alone at the home of someone I really didn't know, but I was really bored and figured I might be able to overcome some social anxiety and maybe even make some female friends there, since he made it sound like a pretty big party. I put the neighborhood he gave me into maps, and it was a suburban area with lots of families as far as I knew. I figured being in a yard on such a nice summer day wouldn't be overly risky because lots of neighbors would be outside, plus it was just a few train stops away from my workplace and I was off in a few hours. I did tell him I wasn't overly comfortable with the idea since I didn't know him well, but I would stop by for a bit if I didn't need to go inside the house at all. He said that was totally fine, which made me feel a lot better. I even made sure not to drink anything for the rest of my shift so I wouldn't be risking needing to go inside to use the bathroom. I was anxious about just showing up to a barbecue with people I didn't know at all, as he implied that the event was already underway, plus I would have had a hard time finding a specific address from the backyard side, so I asked Simon if he could meet me at the train station since he said it was a quick walk anyway. He agreed to do that, and I let him know when I was leaving work and what time maps said the train would get to his station. I sent Simon a message to tell him that I had arrived at the train station around 5:30 after I looked around and couldn't find him. He told me he was running behind and to just start walking toward the neighborhood. I was about halfway across this massive train station parking lot when I saw him slowly wandering toward me. I recognized his clothes, wearing bell-bottoms when they were not common, especially for men, and long hair from far away, but up close his face looked pretty different from his photos. It might have been some heavy-duty editing, I don't even know, but he kind of looked like a different guy. Older than the 25-year-old guy in the photos by 5 to 10 years, maybe used photos of his brother or something, I don't even know, it was before AI. This was just the first real red flag, but I brushed it off. Maybe he's just self-conscious, maybe he smokes a lot and doesn't wear sunscreen and hasn't taken pictures in a while. All of his pictures look candid, so I figured he wasn't much of a selfie guy. And besides, I'm mostly here to make friends anyway, so I shouldn't judge his appearance so harshly. He was also clearly already drunk, but a lot of my ex's friends were heavy drinkers, so that didn't seem strange. He's hosting a barbecue after all. The second red flag came shortly after we arrived at the front door. I reminded him that I wasn't comfortable going inside the house, but he assured me we would just have to walk through to get to the backyard. Okay, fine. It wasn't the kind of neighborhood where you could just walk around the house to get to the backyard. We would have had to backtrack to the main road to go down the alley directly to the backyard. So I figured he just forgot what I said about not wanting to go inside and didn't want to cause a bunch of trouble, so I went with it. We got in the house and he immediately closed the door and locked the deadbolt and knob behind me. I didn't think that was too weird since nobody was hanging out inside and a lot of people are just in the habit of locking the door when they come in, but it did still give me the heebie-jeebies for some reason. Then Simon told me he'd really like to give me a tour of the house house. I politely declined and reminded him that I was just there for the barbecue. He said that he and his bandmates had worked really hard to get the house and he was really proud of it. At that point, I was getting really skeptical because usually when guys would tell me things that seemed a bit far-fetched, they'd let the truth slip by the time they got me to their house. But still, I convinced myself that I was being unreasonable. I was already in the stupid house anyway. He insisted it would be quick. Not the wisest choice, I know, but I was pretty good at explaining away red flags, so at this point, Simon still mostly had a dopey stoner art guy kind of vibe as far as I was concerned. He really didn't seem like a threat, just an insecure oddball who sucks at communicating and fibs a bit. Not unlike my ex, who was definitely emotionally and verbally abusive, but it never escalated past that. I figured at worst he'd get handsy and I'd get called a prude for not with him. I didn't have a lot of self-worth at the time, obviously, so I went with it. The tour started pretty uneventfully. Other than that, the decor in the common areas was obviously chosen by a middle-aged Martha Stewart enthusiast and not a bunch of guys in a band or their fake band manager. I didn't know if this should make me feel better or worse. On one hand, he was clearly trying, but on the other hand, it made me think it was probably just someone's mom's house and she was out of town and he didn't want to tell me he lived at, a friend's parents' home and didn't actually have a paying job. Again, total red flag, but I could rationalize it at the time. The bedroom doors were all closed, bathroom was unremarkable. He then showed me the kitchen and I finally saw through the window that there was nobody in the backyard. There weren't even barbecue supplies around. No burgers thawing on the counter, no cocktail supplies lying around, nothing. I asked him where everyone was and why he lied about the barbecue, and he just told me that his bandmates were on tour still and they were just running behind due to van trouble, but they should be back any minute so we could start the party. I asked him why he wasn't on tour with them if he's in the band. I don't even remember what his answer was to that because it didn't make any sense. At this point, I'm out of mental gymnastics to convince myself that this guy isn't just completely full of shit, and I'm really freaked out. Took me long enough. I'm smarter now, don't worry. I started trying to figure out a way to get out of this situation. I hoped that once he was done with the tour, we could go outside, even for just a minute, and I just leave. I'd been in some sketchy situations in the past, but luckily nothing so bad that they tried very hard to physically stop me when I walked away in a semi-public place. I just wasn't comfortable doing it inside the house. I knew this guy was full of shit, but I had no idea how much worse it would get. I instinctively pretended to believe his bullshit. He offered me a I said no because I had to work in the morning. He said okay and cracked one for himself. Then he wanted to take the tour downstairs, and I could see from the top of the stairs that the basement was the dark and creepy kind with really small windows, so I refused. I asked if we could go back outside. He said after the tour. I tried to argue about going into the basement, told him I had a spider phobia, don't like basements, etc. All lies, but anything that wouldn't let him realize that he was what I was afraid of. He started to get agitated about my reluctance, so I figured it would be better to just let him show me the damn basement, and then hopefully we could go outside because I really didn't know what else to do. The basement was fairly unremarkable. Couch, TV, elliptical, until I noticed something that gave me chills. The house was probably built in the 1990s or late 80s at the absolute earliest, but I saw a door that looked just like the heavy, foam-lined door to the cold storage room in my grandma's house. The kind that they only open from the outside. It was just a smaller version of the big metal doors on commercial walk-in fridges, and it looked really out of place in his house. I would absolutely not go anywhere near that door. He opened it and told me that it was their soundproof music studio. I looked inside from a few meters anyway. It did look indeed soundproof, but it was about the size of a bedroom and I could see a few guitars and amps in it, mattress toppers on the walls, no drum kit or recording equipment that I could see. He insisted I go inside to get a better look. He was standing outside the door, motioning for me to go inside. Holy shit, the alarm bells are really going off now. At this point, I realized I could totally die here if I'm not careful, and I turned around to run up the stairs. He closed the door and followed me, asking what's wrong, acting like I'm being all unreasonable for not wanting to see his soundproof music studio. So I'm realizing that this is a way sketchier situation than any of my ex's bullshit, and I'm freaked right out. At that point, my main objective was getting out of the house. The front and back doors were both closed and locked, so if I tried to run, he'd be able to get to me before I could get the locks open. The bathroom did not have a window. The house had a convoluted floor plan that I wasn't familiar with, and he was much bigger than I am. He was the tall, lanky type who could run fast even if they're out of shape and smoke a pack a day. I pretended that I was okay with hanging out with him in the hopes that he'd chill out a bit. I desperately mentioned yet again that it was beautiful outside and suggested we go sit in the yard while we wait. He said no and started to get agitated that I wanted to leave already. I told him that I could stay, but I just really like to smoke. He told me that we could smoke inside and pointed to a cereal bowl full of butts. God damn it. We sat down at the table and lit some. As he was smoking, he started rolling it, which he promptly lit as soon as his other was done. He offered me some, but I said no thanks. He insisted, so I took the smallest puff I could. I'm pretty seasoned with that stuff, but I pretended to cough excessively and told him I'm a novice, so that was more than enough for me. For a liar himself, he thankfully wasn't very good at picking up on the lies of others. After we partook, he asked if I'd like to watch a movie until his bandmates got back. I told him that I was really looking forward to spending the day outside and suggested we go for a walk or visit the park. Ideas he did not like or appreciate. At this point, I was trying to keep as much distance as possible between us, but he stayed close enough to me that I could smell what he was drinking on his breath. He grabbed me by the waist and I backed away and asked about the barbecue food to try and change the subject and make him think I still believed what he was telling me. He started to get angry again and sternly reiterated that his bandmates should be home any minute, and my anxiety was absolutely through the roof. I tried to calm him down again with generic small talk. Now, I don't know how I got so lucky, but the next thing that happened might have saved me. Simon went to the fridge to get another drink and pulled out an empty box. At this point, he's getting even more pissed off than before, so I went out on a limb and suggested we go get some more drinks for the party because I was out of ideas. I was terrified that it would enrage him even more to suggest once again that we leave the house, but I had to try. Thankfully though, his eyes lit up with the possibility that I could actually be down to drink with him, and he agreed. As we were walking to the store, I still didn't really have a plan because I was no longer comfortable just walking away from this menace in this weirdly desolate suburb, but I was extremely relieved to be out of that house. I walked with him to the store, and when we got there, I told him I didn't need to go inside if he was just gonna go grab some himself. He insisted that I had to go inside, and at that point I was so stressed and frazzled I just went with him and hoped that a good opportunity to leave would arise. When we got inside the store, he asked what kind of drink I wanted. I reminded him that I had to work tomorrow and I didn't want too much. He demanded to know what kind of drink I wanted, so I just named the first one that came to mind. We went to pay, and the cashier was kind of an asshole, so I didn't ask for help. I probably should have, but I panicked and didn't. I hoped there might be somebody in the parking lot who might help me if I made a scene, but there was nobody. I really regretted not asking the store guy for help, but also remembered the times my ex told people I was crazy so they wouldn't take me seriously. Store guy definitely seemed like he would have fell for that, so probably for the best I didn't expect him to help me. I had one last idea before I took my chances just trying to run and or scream. There was another store across from us. I told Simon I had to go buy a toothbrush or some shit that vaguely implied I might stay over. He eagerly agreed to this but tried to follow me into the store. I told him you're not allowed to bring drinks into a store like this. I don't know if that's even true, but I really doubt it's any kind of law, but luckily this drunk douchebag believed it and agreed to wait outside. Now my naive ass might have thought maybe I could just wander around in this store for long enough and he would either get the hint or get sketched out or bored and leave. But no, I must have wandered around the store for at least half an hour with this jackass is still standing there staring in the window. This creep didn't even have his phone out. Every time I checked if he was still there, he was just staring through the window looking for me. I didn't feel like I had anybody I could call in the city to come help me. The cops here don't usually take things like this very seriously, and the store workers looked like they were mostly high school students, and I didn't want to drag them into this, so I really didn't feel like I had a lot of options. After being in there for so long, I was surprised he didn't come in to see what was taking me so long. I thought maybe I could lose him in the aisles and sneak out of the store if he did come in, but nope. I ended up hovering around the tills and waited until a big group of friendly-looking people were paying. I followed them out of the store and immediately told Simon to leave me alone and go home. I said it firmly and loudly enough to imply that I would make a scene if need be. Simon looked at the people getting in their car, who were now pausing and looking at us because I had nearly yelled at him, and then he just turned around and left. It was bizarrely anticlimactic, which I was very thankful for. I ran to the train station, which thankfully was in a different direction than his house from the store, and I never heard from him again. When I got home, his app profile had either blocked me or been deleted. Years later, after I stopped compartmentalizing the whole thing, I wish I would have reported him or something. It bothers me to wonder if he tried it again with someone else, but made sure the fridge was stocked first. But at the time, I didn't think anybody would take me seriously. I was embarrassed of my choices, and I really just wanted to move on from the whole thing. Plus, all I really had was a likely fake first name and a general idea of where the house was, which probably wasn't even his. I'll probably never know any more than I do now, and maybe that's for the best. Anyway, Simon, you lying POS, let's not meet. Yeah, so needless to say, that story was absolutely insane and kind of shows how people in these crazy situations can find ways to rationalize, I'm not living in a horror movie. This isn't, how the movies play out. This is fine. I'm fine. They have that normalcy bias and they overlook all these red flags until you just realize it's a very dangerous situation. I'm just glad this poster was able to get out of that. And now to switch sides, we're about to hear a male poster go over and explain to us the worst dating app experience he's ever had, which is equally going to make you want to delete those kinds of apps when you hear just how weird this story is. The post is called Worst Hinge Date I've Ever Been On, and the user says, I told my friends what I'm about to tell you and they urged me to share it here. It happened back in December, about a week before Christmas. I'm a 32-year-old guy currently using my GI Bill to go to college in a city in one of the mountain time zone states. I'm so busy with school and work, so I don't have time to go out and socialize often, so I have to rely a lot on the apps to go on dates. I matched with this really cute girl around my age. We had a good convo and then we scheduled a date. It was at a bar restaurant not far for either of us to drive, so it was was easy. She was very pretty in person and we got along great. During our conversation, I found that she worked in a non-cop role at a police station, like a receptionist essentially. I also learned she had a roommate whom she said was out of town for the holidays. She added that she hated being alone because she had a crazy ex-boyfriend who stalked her. I was a little uneasy at that and told her as much, and she said he's harmless, so I let it go. We had a few more drinks and were there about another hour, and at her suggestion, she said we should go back to her place, and I mean, I wasn't going to argue it. She was hot, lol. She then insisted on driving. I told her I was fine, and she said no, I had been going hard and she saw too many DUIs at her job. I got what she was saying, but I only had 2 and felt fine, and again, she insisted. I thought it was weird, but I didn't care. We went to her house and she walked up and just opened the door. She didn't unlock it, it was already open, which I found very odd, because she said she had a stalker and that her roommate was gone. She started feeding her cat, and as she was doing that, I saw a bowl of cereal on the kitchen counter. I touched it and it was still cold, like it hadn't been there for a while. The cereal wasn't soggy either. I asked her whose it was and she hesitated and said she ate it as a snack before heading out to meet me. It just didn't make sense, and before you could say anything, she just kissed me and put her arms around me seductively and told me to take her to her room. Again, she was pretty hot and I quit caring about the cereal. We started fooling around and I went to close the curtains and she told me to leave them open. A few minutes later, maybe 5, we were in bed and my back was to the window and she let out a huge gasp, a scared gasp. Her eyes were at the window. I turned around and saw someone in a hoodie and they took off. I heard the steps running on her back deck. I immediately jumped up and ran out to make sure her doors were locked, and of course the front door wasn't. I ran to it and locked it, and right when I did, the door started banging. I went in to open it because I was gonna f the dude up, or try to, and she told me to just go back to bed with her. I screamed at her and asked if she was insane, and she told me he does this and goes away. And I asked her, "You know this is your ex?" And she said yeah, and not to worry about it. At this point, he started banging on the side of the house on the other end, and she didn't seem at all scared and kept trying to get me to come back to her bed. I didn't want to call the cops because for all I know, this dude is a cop, or she'd know the cops that showed up and would take her side. I also couldn't just leave because my car was at the bar and I was terrified. At this point, I started calling her out for the door not being locked, the cereal. I openly called her a liar. She couldn't come up with any logical answers and I had no idea what I was into. I shouldn't have done this, but my fight or flight was pretty much kicked in and I told her, if this is a robbery or some kind of setup, I promise I will kill you both. I'm not a hard ass or anything, but my fear told me to let her know that no matter what it was, they'd have a fight on their hands. My thoughts of what were going to happen to me were all over the place. I ordered an Uber off my phone and didn't tell her. I just kept arguing with her and asking what was going on, hoping to just keep her talking and in the room. I stayed right next to the door so I could leave ASAP. Luckily, I never got my pants off and my jacket and shoes were right by the door, so I was able to get dressed. The Uber showed up and without saying anything, I just opened her door and ran out as fast as I could. I looked back at the door and she was just standing there. It's only been a little over a month, but I honestly have no idea what the fuck I was into. I don't believe the story of just a girl with a crazy ex based off the factors I told you. It feels like a robbery or some weird fetishized type thing. I don't know. Definitely something I'm very mad at myself for. I mean, I'm a 9-year Navy vet and allowed myself to get into a situation like that. I reported her account on Uber ride back to the bar, and I told the bartender as well if they ever saw her in there again. So while maybe not as serious as the last one, I mean, this guy definitely was in some danger, I'm also leaning on the latter idea of this just being some really weird, freaky thing between this couple that probably isn't broken up, but maybe they go through this scenario and he has to try to scare her and they scare off the guy or they ask the guy to join. I don't know. It's definitely on some weird shit, but is nevertheless terrifying, but maybe not as scary as the final story today that is titled, "There was a man hiding in our house for a few weeks." This Reddit user explains, "Okay, I want to start by saying this actually happened. This isn't some creepy story or something I made up. I still have trouble sleeping alone because of it. Even now, years later at 27, I check every closet and lock every door at least 3 times before bed. So yeah, here's why I don't want to stay home alone anymore. I was female, almost 17, living with my mom and my little brother Ryan, like 7 at the time. My mom worked night shifts at a nursing home, so I was usually the one watching Ryan when she was gone. Since he was younger, he'd be asleep by 8, and I'd just do my thing, watch TV, scroll on my phone, and eat junk food. You know, typical teenager stuff. We lived in this little 1-story house on the edge of some woods. It wasn't totally isolated, but there weren't many neighbors nearby either. I used to love having the house to myself at night, until all of this happened. So the first time I noticed something weird, it was small. I was in bed around 11 p.m., scrolling through my phone when I heard this shuffling sound, like someone dragging their feet on the carpet. I froze. Ryan was asleep. My mom wasn't home. I sat there, holding my breath, listening. It was quiet for a few seconds, and then I heard it again. A soft scuffing noise, like someone was moving real slowly through the living room. I grabbed my phone and crept out of my room, my heart pounding. I checked the front door. Locked. The windows. Locked. Nothing looked out of place. But then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The hall closet was open. Just a crack. We never left that door open. Ever. I stood there for a second, my whole body on edge. I wanted to just turn around and go back to my room, but my dumbass decided to check. quick. I pulled the door open fast. Nothing, just coats and shoes. I remember laughing at myself. I was just being paranoid. Still, I locked the closet door before I went back to bed. A few nights later, I woke up out of nowhere. At first, I didn't know why. Then I realized I could hear breathing. I was laying there completely still, my whole body locked up in fear. It wasn't coming from the hallway. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside my room. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking, and turned on the flashlight. I shined it around. Nothing. The room was empty. The closet was closed. I barely slept the rest of the night. After that, I started feeling weird all the time, like I was being watched. Like whenever I turned my back, someone was just out of sight, peeking around a corner. I told my mom, but she brushed it off. Then about a week later, she woke me up after coming back home early from work. She looked off. She asked me why the back door was unlocked, and I assured her I'd locked it, and she told me it was unlocked and that she just had to lock it. I knew without a doubt that I had locked it the night before, but I didn't argue. That night, I was on edge. I kept my bedroom door locked and my phone in my hand just in case. I woke up to more breathing and just that gut feeling that someone's watching you. My whole body went cold. I sat up, barely breathing, and listened. I noticed my closet door was open, which was also weird. I turned on my flashlight just in time to see it swing open another inch, and that's when I saw him. I swear to you, there was a man crouched inside my closet, skin pale as hell, hair greasy and matted. He was too thin, like he hadn't eaten in weeks, and he was grinning at me. I don't even remember getting out of bed. One second I was staring at him, the next I was slamming my door shut and running to Ryan's room. Ryan woke up crying as I grabbed him and ran out of the house, my phone already dialing 911. The cops got there fast. They found him still in my closet. Turns out, he had been living in our crawl space for weeks. He had gotten in through a loose vent in the basement and had been sneaking into the house at night, watching us sleep, taking food when we weren't looking. But the worst part, when they pulled him out, they found something tucked behind my coats, a knife. The police said he was probably waiting for the right moment. I tried to not think of what would have happened if I hadn't woken up that night. I swear this actually happened and it fucks with me to this day. So to the man in my closet, let's never, ever meet again.